The river was cut from the world's great flood and flows over rocks from the basement of time. On some of the rocks are timeless raindrops, and under the rocks are the words. Some of the words are theirs. I am haunted by the waters. Some of you may recognize those words from the book or the movie, A River Runs Through It. Anybody ever seen the movie or read the book? A few of you. Today we are beginning a 5-part sermon series on rivers in the Bible. And I think summer is a good time to do this. Some of my best summertime and vacation memories involve rivers. I grew up in York, not far from the Susquehanna River, and I have memories of my father taking me fishing. Our time together was as slow and unhurried as the current flowing in the evening breeze. There was a place near Wrightsville called Long Level, and my Aunt Joanne used to take me there for long walks and talks. I would marvel at the expanse of the river going a mile across and try to skip my stones as far as they could go in the rippling current. And now, since living in Milton, along the west branch of the Susquehanna River, that body of water has become even more important for me. Last year I helped with the water blessing ceremony at the marina at Shikellamy State Park. And I take great joy in going with my husband and my children on walks along the river at Milton State Park. I'm hoping to create memories with them that will last a lifetime. The Bible, too, has river memories. And we're going to be talking about those over these next couple weeks. And as I was reading through these texts, I came to 2 conclusions about rivers. 1, rivers can bring out the best in people. And 2, rivers can bring out the worst in people. Today we're going to look at a story of the river bringing out the best and the worst in people. The river in this case is the Nile in Egypt. And the story takes place thousands of years ago when the people of Israel were enslaved in that powerful nation. The Pharaoh had initiated a policy of apartheid and slavery in the land, forcing the Israelites into hard labor. He thought that this would keep them in their place, teach them who was in control, keep them quiet and submissive. But even in the midst of this hardship, the Israelites continued to grow in strength and number. So the Pharaoh responded by imposing more and more harsh tasks on them. And he came up with a plan of genocide. He decreed that all male babies born in Israel should be killed. It made perfect sense. Kill all the males, there won't be anybody to rise up against their oppressors. Pharaoh made a key mistake, however. He underestimated the power of the women. First of all, he instructed the Egyptian midwives to do the killing of the babies. Now, he should have known better. I was attended to by midwives in the births of my 2 children. And I can tell you there is no way that a midwife is going to kill a child that she just brought into the world. So when Pharaoh summoned them to ask, why aren't these babies dying, they came up with a very clever response. They said, well, the Hebrew women are so much more stronger and more robust. They have their babies before we even get there. One of the few times it was okay to tell a lie in the Bible. So Pharaoh went beyond the midwives and came up with a law for all the Egyptians. Every boy born to a Hebrew household is to be thrown into the river and drowned. You see, rivers can bring out the worst in people. So that's what brings us to this beloved story that we all heard in Sunday school, baby Moses in the bulrushes. Being a mother myself, I try to imagine what it must have been like for Moses' mother to take her precious 3-month-old baby, wrap him in a blanket, and place him in a basket along the river's edge, not knowing what would happen to him. Things would have to be really desperate for me to let my child go like that, entrusting him to the unpredictable flow of the river, not knowing who might find my baby and what might happen to him. What could drive a mother to do such a thing? A friend of mine shared with me a story of a missionary that he knew in Africa and Liberia. This woman had finished her task and she was getting on a plane to come back to the United States when one of the Liberian women came up to her with a package wrapped in a tattered cloth. It was a baby, and she was begging this missionary to take the child back with her. She knew that the anguish of losing her child, hoping that it would have a better life, would better than holding on to it and watching the child die in her arms. I can only imagine that kind of dire situation in my worst nightmare, but that's what Moses' mother faced. But even though she was desperate, she kept her head about her. She thought this through. She strategically placed the basket in the reeds and had the older sister standing at the side to watch over her little brother. And then, who would come down to the river but Pharaoh's daughter and her entourage? Coincidence? Or had Moses' mother cleverly planned this out ahead of time? We'll never know. All the Bible tells us is that Pharaoh's daughter found the child in the basket, undoubtedly hearing the child cry. She knew right away that this was a Hebrew child. Now, what she should have done, what her father would have wanted her to do, was to take that child and throw him out into the river and watch him drown, feeling satisfaction that the only good Israelite is a dead Israelite. We've all heard the racist jokes told today that undoubtedly had their counterparts in ancient Egypt. What do you call 100 baby Israelite boys at the bottom of the Nile? A good start. And laughter would erupt around the men at her father's table. But she couldn't do it. She knew it was wrong. She knew that the law was unjust. And she knew that's not the kind of person she was. She might have been her father's daughter, but she was not her father's henchman. So she picked up that baby and held it, and then she very quickly realized that she didn't have a way to feed this baby who was obviously very hungry. What was she going to do? And lo and behold, along comes a little Hebrew girl. It says, I know of a Hebrew woman who could be the wet nurse for this child. Would you like me to go and get her? So Moses' brother is brought there. I sometimes wonder if Pharaoh's daughter figured it out right on the spot, seeing the family resemblance between the little boy and the little girl and the mother. Again, we'll never know, but in any case, she gave the boy back to his mother to nurse him and raise him up until he became a man. Not only that, but she gave her money to do this task. So she was not only saving Moses' life, she was saving the family's life as well. Because remember, they were slaves. They were not to be paid for anything. So by saving this little boy, she's not only helping him, she's giving dignity to this mother and survival to the family as well. So you see, Pharaoh underestimated the power of the women. The Bible doesn't even see fit to give them names, these two Hebrew slaves and the Egyptian princess. But here they are conspiring together to save the life of one child. Because you see, Pharaoh underestimated not only the power of the women, underestimated the power of God. Because the river can also bring out the best in people. Pharaoh intended for those waters to be an instrument of death, but God used those waters to be an instrument of life. And for this one child, they became like the waters of baptism, the waters of life that gave him a new chance, a new start. In fact, the name that Pharaoh's daughter gave to the little boy has a double meaning that shows the joke that she played on her father. The name Moses in Egypt means son, but in Hebrew it means I drew him out of the water. It's an interesting idea because then later on, when Moses becomes a man, he is the one who draws the entire nation of Israel through the waters of the Red Sea, which we're going to talk about next week. So this idea of women coming together, conspiring beyond bounds of race and class to work against unjust laws and practices, it still happens today. Think about Mothers Against Drunk Driving, where one mother was devastated by the loss of her child to a drunk driving accident. But she used that grief to form an entire organization to help educate people about the dangers of driving after drinking. And untold numbers of people have been saved through her actions. And I think about the Million Mom March, where women came from across the nation to protest against gun violence. And it happens right here in the Susquehanna Valley, at the Transitions Crisis Center, where women help women and their children who are abused, suffering from domestic violence. It's women coming together across the bounds of race and class to save the children and the families. It may even have happened in your own household. I'll bet some of you were raised in a family without a father for whatever reason, divorce or death, or simply not being present. And who was it that looked out for you, who put a roof over your head, who made sure that you towed the line, had something to eat? It was your mother, or your grandmother, or your aunt, or your sister. It's that way in a lot of families. When the chips are down and the men are violent or neglectful or just not there, it's the women who come together that make sure that the children will survive. Sometimes they have to use subversive means, pool their resources, do whatever they have to do to survive. But they do it. They draw the children out of dangerous waters. And they inspire men to do the same thing as well. For Moses becomes the one to draw people out of dangerous waters. Now, this is not to say that all women are heroes, because there are certainly some women who have committed abuse. But if you think about your life, you can probably name at least one woman who was like those Hebrew women, who demonstrated that kind of strength and cunning and love that those women had at the Nile River. Who was that woman for you? Who drew you out of dangerous waters? Who made sure that you were safe? Have you thanked her? Have you lived your life to honor her legacy? And have you, in turn, helped to draw others out of dangerous waters? Because you see, the river is a metaphor for life. Life sometimes brings out the worst in people, but sometimes it brings out the best in people. Think of the river and what God is calling you to do. How will the river, how will God bring out the best in you. Amen.